For this project, we'll be using the Roycycled Crockery Stencil. This stencil is so much fun because you get two different crocks and you get all these marks that you can use on your different projects. I'm also going to be using the Franz Botanical from ILD, and I have these to apply texture, which I'll be building up with some salt wash. So this is just a wood panel that I actually found at the dollar store. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to tape down my stencil so it doesn't move around. I'm going to mix together some paint and some kind of putty colors or crockery colors with my salt wash. I have a base rule of about 50-50 salt wash to paint, but then you can make adjustments based on how thick you want your paint to be for your project. For this one, I do want my mixture to be pretty thick because I'm going to be troweling it on to my surface. For this particular project, because I don't want there to be any texture from the texture medium, I'm going to be mixing my paint and my powder up, and then I'm going to spend some time really smoothing out any of kind of the lumps and the bumps that would be in the texture that I normally wouldn't care about, because I do want it to trowel on pretty smoothly. Once I have it all mixed, I can go ahead and push it through my stencil, and the tool that I'm using is just a rubber paint brush. I believe is what it's called on Amazon, but I like it because it gives me complete control, and the set that I have had different sizes. Once I create kind of the exterior of my crockery, it makes it super easy to go in with my texture medium and just apply it in the exact shape of the crock. Once I get everything on there, I'm going to smooth this out because, again, we're trying to emulate, something that's a little bit more smoother and defined. Now, these stamps are from ILD. I use them on so many different things, but I'm going to be going in and adding some texture onto my piece. But first, I want to create a bit of a crust over the top. I don't want to dry it so much that I'm not able to make impressions, but I do want to just kind of dry the top some so that it doesn't stick to my stamps. I'm using cornstarch to dust my stamps, and this will also help to ensure that my texture medium doesn't stick to my stamp because I don't want to pull it up. I really want to have my impressions be pretty specific. I don't want it to look like random texture, but I want it to look like the stamp that I'm using. And this is going to be so good to just go in and add some extra kind of cracks into my crockery. Isn't that so yummy? Look at that texture. I want to make sure and get this completely dry before I move on to any next steps because I don't want to disturb the texture that I've already created. The next step is really important. I've used a chalk style paint and salt wash, both of which are really porous. So I'm going to seal everything before I move into the next steps because I don't want my paint or my washes to be sucked up really fast and me not have any control over my final finish. So by sealing this first, it enables me to have a lot more control over how much color is laid on here and how my final finish is going to look. In order to maintain kind of the presence of the crockery, I am going to go around with just some chalk style paint, a little darker than the paint that I used inside, just so you can see the form of the crock on my piece. And I'm just using a simple makeup sponge to push the paint through. And it's better to take your time and do a couple of passes over your stencil than to try to go in with too much product and have a lot of paint bleed under the stencil. I am so excited about this project. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glaze my crock, and I'm using a walnut glaze. And I'm really being deliberate in pushing this glaze down into all the texture that I just created. If I had not sealed this crockery first, all this glaze would have been sucked up really quickly and I would have ended up with something really dark. But because it's sealed, I'm able to wipe back where I want to. So when I'm going through and wiping back the glaze, I'm really focusing on wiping off on the high points. I don't want to push my wipe down into um, the texture I've created because I want the glaze to stay in those places. I'm using the glaze and I'm darkening the edges of the crockery. The edges of the crockery would get darker as it turns away from the light, and this is going to really help to create more dimension. And I know I'm going to paint my board, but I'm going to go ahead and paint just a shadow on this side of my crockery just to give it a little bit more dimension. And the middle I left really light because we know that dark colors recede into the background and light colors kind of pop out at us, right? So in using my lights and my darks, I just want to create some dimension so that my crock doesn't look like it's sitting flat on my panel. I'm going in with some white now just to create some highlights, just to push the shape of that crock even further. Um, I used just a little bit of alcohol. I didn't quite like that highlight there being so evident. Um, but I just want to create some dimension and not have it fall flat on my surface. And so after I'm done with that, I'm going to go ahead and seal everything up that I've done to make sure that it doesn't move throughout the rest of the process. For the background, I'm using one of my favorite colors. You guys know I love teal. And I want the back to be dynamic. So rather than just choose one color, I'm actually going to be blending two colors together. I want to create space for my plants that I'm going to put into my crockery. So I'm going to blend kind of a lighter color around the crock and then a darker color as we move out towards the edges of the panel. This is going to help to create like a visual space so that my leaves don't get lost in the background. The way that I love to blend is I'll apply my paint with one brush, and then I like to use a dry brush to actually blend my colors together. I'm using a misting spray bottle, and what that does, it just helps me to loosen up the paint that's on the board so it can move more readily. And this is how I'm able to blend colors together. I don't need my blend to be super perfect, but if I were wanting to perfect this blend, I would go in with a drier brush and just do some dry brushing and blending. If there is one thing that I've learned from creating, it's this: perfection is the enemy of progress. What if we just start? Because here's the truth. So often we wait for the perfect time or the perfect situation, the alignment of the planets and the stars to be perfect. But the reality is, we're never going to feel ready. So why not just start? Start messy. Start unsure. Start small. Just start. Because stuck is worse than imperfection every single time. What's something you've been holding back on because you're waiting for it to be perfect? I want to be sure and maintain a visual space for my leaves. So I'm just going to go in and apply a little bit more of the lighter color that I'm using with this blend. Now that I have my background all painted and it's completely dry, I can go in with my transfers. This Franz transfer is one of my favorites. I think I use this one more than any other transfer. I want you guys to watch as I break down this transfer. Sometimes I watch people use transfers and they feel locked in by how the transfer is on the sheet, as if you only can use it that way. But you can cut these apart and use them exactly how you need to. So I liked this transfer, but I recognize that it's not going to work as it's laid down or as it's laid out on the sheet. So I am going to cut it out so that I can use it exactly the way I need. And anything left over, I can just tape the backing onto the transfer. I want to make sure that they don't get separated in my stash, and I can use for a smaller project another day. It's really important to make sure that everything is dry before you start laying down your transfers, but I can just lay down this transfer right over this. And when I'm laying this down, I'm really being thoughtful about how the plants are coming out of my crock, right? I don't want it to look like it's just there on top of the crock, but I want it to look as if it's coming out of the crockery. And for this part of the project, I would encourage you guys to just kind of, once you have a basic plan of what works and what you're going to do, give yourself permission to just make decisions based on your gut, right? So you don't have to be super thoughtful about it. Once you lay out a plan and you have it, you can allow yourself to just be free and just create from your heart. And by layering these pieces over the top of the ones that I put on first, it also gives more dimension. It gives the idea that there are some leaves that are in the background, and then there are some that are closer in the foreground. I want to make sure and maintain my shadow because that also gives my crock some shape. And I think that I want to add a little bit of bling. This is one of the newer transfers from Iron Orchid Design, and I love it so much. I haven't gotten to use it as much as I would like to, but I want to add just a little bit of gold to this. This background is so deep and so luscious. I feel like I just need a little bit of sparkle. And that's it. What do you guys think? The next project we're going to work with, we're going to be using the Textures decoupage paper by Roycycled, some ILD transfers, and I'm going to be using one of the ILD boards for this one. And we're going to be using the Crockery Stencil again, but for this one, we're going to be doing a little bit of a collage, if you will, using the paper and the stencils, but creating a piece of wall art. And I love projects like this because you can create something that is absolutely perfect for your space or your room or for a gift that you may be creating for someone else. I contemplated using another recycled paper on the background of this, but ultimately I felt like that might be a little bit too busy because of the pattern on the paper that we're going to use for the crock. So I decided to just paint the background. And I'm going to be going in with my rubber paintbrush again. And I have 3 different colors of gray at different values. So we have dark, medium, and a light. And I'm just going to put them down on my panel, just really haphazardly. This is going to help create some visual texture. Even though the background is basically going to be gray and white, adding the visual texture will give it some interest. And there's really no rules to this. You guys, I'm literally just laying down color randomly. I do put my paint down all over and not just in one spot at a time, just so I can have some balance. But other than that, I'm just putting on paint and thinning it out with my spatula. Once I get my background all painted, I'm just going to make sure that it's completely dry before we move on to our next steps. I do want to put down kind of a tabletop on the bottom here. Looking at this after the fact, I probably should have made it a little bit taller. That should have been about 1/3 of my canvas would have been better. So when you're making yours and you're laying down your tabletop, think about your canvas in thirds. And the bottom third would be nice to have been a tabletop for this piece. I hope you're enjoying this free tutorial. Remember, you can find a list of retailers at roycycled.com to find your own Roycycled decoupage paper. I'm going to be using a simple dauber and some Iron Orchid Design ink, and I'm actually going to put my stencil onto the Roycycled paper first, and this is just going to inform me exactly how I need to cut this out. You'll note that I'm just focused on the outline only at this point. I want to make sure that I dry my ink, but I'm also allowing the heat from my dryer to also warm it up in order to set it. I want to make sure that it's not going to run when I get ready to decoupage it to my surface. How fun is that, you guys? So we have a ceramic vase. It's not really a crockery at this point, right? But we have this really pretty ceramic vase that we can use to hold our flowers. So once I decide on my placement and what I'm going to put on here, I get to have fun, really, and put all of these things together in this one piece. So I'm going to start by decoupaging my vase onto my surface. You guys, using your papers with this stencil creates so many options of what you can create. I use this blue and white kind of texture, but I could have just as well used any of the other textures on this paper with either of the crockery on the stencil. Again, I'm just using a little bit of charcoal just to create a little bit of a shadow. And because it's charcoal, I'm going to go ahead and seal that right away because I don't want that moving around or smearing too much. Now that I have my vase down on my surface, I do want to go around the edges and bring back those details. This is the benefit of having this stencil, is that you can use the stencil to both create a cutout for your paper, but also be able to go back and lay it over the exact same area and apply any details that you would like. And so you guys can see that this has so many different options for different textures you can use for your projects when you get ready to make yours. When I'm thinking about how this is going to come out of my crock, again, I don't want it to just be sitting on the top. I want it to look as if it's coming out, right? So I think having some of it come out over the top and some of it be over is going to be perfect for that. This is a project that I made using another stencil of mine. This one was a closed stencil, and you guys can see that I used the transfer underneath paper. And that paper that I used over top, I played with some transparency in order to make it look like glass. It's really important to make sure that your surface is really, really dry before you start applying your transfer. You can usually tell if it's still some moisture in your surface because your transfer will not adhere as readily. If you run into a situation where you've perhaps started your transfer and it's not adhering readily, don't rush it. Just let it rest, and that surface will continue to dry, and you can come back and once it's dry, the transfer will lay down correctly. So I would just like to admonish you, if you run into a situation where you've started your transfer and your surface isn't completely dry, don't panic, just walk away or continue on another portion of your project and let it dry before you go back to it. I want to add a little more texture to my vase, and so I'm using the IOD Crackle stencil. When I'm using it like this, a lot of times I'll cut it into a really organic shape just to make sure that I don't end up with some really straight edges, right, with my crackle, because I want it to look like it's really organic and it's supposed to be there. There's something about a dropped leaf on these. I just love it so much. So I'm going to just cut out a portion of these leaves and lay them down as if they've dropped onto my tabletop right next to my leaf. And this also helps with my composition as well, because before everything was on the right, although it does take up 2/3 of my composition, which is good, but this just lends a little bit of weight to the bottom here so that it's a little bit more balanced. Once I've waited for my surface to dry, I can go ahead and finish transferring this piece. But even now, there's still moisture. So I'm going to be patient because I don't want to lift up the paint and ruin this transfer. So I'm just going to let that dry while we move on and finish up this project. So because we have flowers in our vase, the shadow is not going to just be the vase, right? We're also going to have some kind of random shadows from what's in the vase. So I just want to go in and add a little bit of texture there to kind of represent that. Add a little bit of shadow underneath my leaf so that it looks more dimensional. I did get a spot of ink here on my project, so I'm just going to go in and just correct that really quickly. And I'm going to use my spatula because I don't want my texture to be different in that one spot. I do want to go in and add some highlights in my vase. So we're just going to go as if this vase would be really smooth, right? So we would have like a really distinct kind of a highlight on here if we were looking at this in one life. And so adding highlights and shadows just really helps to add more dimension into your projects. And once I let this dry completely, I was able to do this transfer, and this is the project. What do you guys think? I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Be sure and check out the information on my masterclass below, or you can check out Roycycled Academy for other courses I teach. Otherwise, you can find me on all the places: Facebook, TikTok, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, all at Roycycled. Thank you so much. You guys, remember, there isn't anything that I've taught today that you cannot absolutely do. You can do this, and you can do it today. Bye.